taking place within the council chambers at the Golden Plains Shire Council Civic Centre in Bannockburn and is open to the public. As chair of the meeting, I give my consent for this council meeting to be streamed live to the public in accordance with section 14 of Council's Governance Rules 2021. I have the discretion and authority to at any time to direct the termination of or interruption of the live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of the debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. I will now recite the opening declaration on behalf of all councillors. We, the councillors of Golden Plains Shire, declare that we will undertake on every occasion to carry out our duties in the best interest of the community, and that our conduct shall maintain the standards of the Code of Good Governance, so that we may faithfully represent and uphold the trust placed in this council by the peoples of Golden Plains Shire. Acknowledgement of country. Golden Plains Shire spans the traditional lands of the Wadawurrung and Eastern Maar people. We acknowledge them as the traditional owners and custodians. Council pays its respects to Wadawurrung elders past, present and emerging. Council also respects Eastern Maar elders past, present and emerging. Council extends that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are part of the Golden Plains Shire. Now we move on to apologies and leave of absence. Are there any apologies for this meeting or requests for leave of absence? Nil. Confirmation of minutes. Councillors, we have a resolution before us to confirm the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 23rd of November 2021 as circulated. Can I have a mover, please? Deputy Mayor Kirby, and a seconder? Councillor Cunningham. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. Conflicts of interest. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interests?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr Mayor, I have declaring a conflict of interest, just a general conflict of interest on item 7.2.
No public questions have been submitted for this meeting. Now we move on to the agenda. Councillors, before we commence the formal agenda for the meeting for the evening, we have several residents who wish to speak to their submissions to the Rating Strategy Propositions paper tonight. Out of respect to the valuable time given by these residents, it has been proposed that the order of business is altered to consider this agenda item earlier in the evening. In accordance with the Governance Rule 24.2, the order of business may only be altered by council resolution. Can I please have a councillor to move the motion, quote, that the item listed at 7.9 on the agenda, being the Rating Strategy Propositions paper submissions, be considered after the item listed as 7.1 Delegates report. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Getson. And a seconder? Councillor Rowe. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. We now move on to consider the formal agenda. Item 7, business reports for decision. Number 1, Delegates report, 23rd of November 2021 to the 20th of December 2021. I'll now ask Mr. Brasless to briefly introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, this is the monthly delegates report highlighting where the councillors have been over the last 4 weeks and the events they've attended to and the council meetings and briefings. I just put that to you for your consideration.
Recommendation is that Council receive and note the Delegates report, 23rd of November 2021 to 20th December 2021. Do I have a motion? Councillor Whitfield. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Whitfield, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to add to what's in the report this month, I attended I think 5 rating strategy conversation posts in total. Bannockburn, Smyesdale, Inverleigh, Dereel, Meredith, and of course the online one that was held. I was very pleased to attend the Meredith Primary School to give the Mayor's Award. I attended the Twilight Market in Bannockburn. This event's growing from strength to strength. And I attended the Youth Movie Night in Inverleigh, which was run by the Inverleigh Progress Association with support from Council's youth working team. A well-attended and successful event there. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Cunningham, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add on to a couple of the other activities I undertook this month. I attended the G21 Tourism Board meeting re the recruitment of a new chairperson, which hopefully the process will see us have a new chairperson in the role and appointed by February 2022. I attended the Maud, Stieglitz and She Oaks Community Fund Day, took part in the CCTV Steering Committee meeting, attended the strategic briefing session, community conservation posts which are held at Farmers Market online, Smyesdale, Dereel, Inverleigh, Meredith, community services portfolio meeting which was undertaken during the month, the Youth Hub reference group meeting. I attended the Bannockburn Chamber of Commerce Christmas function, had the privilege of attending the Inverleigh Primary School night that was held at the Geelong Library, where we gave the Merrell Award, and that was held at the Geelong Library. I also had the privilege of attending the Rotary Club of Cardinia, Rotary Club of Geelong and Volunteering Geelong Volunteer of the Year Awards, which is open to all council shires that take part in the G21. These awards aim to recognise key volunteers who have gone above and beyond to support a wide range of community-based organisations and charities and clubs. It was my privilege to nominate Kath Burke, a local resident of Bannockburn who, with over 20 years of selfless volunteering, starting with involvement at the Bannockburn Playgroup, Kinder, Primary School, etc., through to her major contribution as a volunteer at the Bannockburn Football and Netball Club, where she is a player, coach and serving committee member. She has contributed hundreds of hours of volunteering, is an inspirational role model for many junior sports people. I am pleased to announce Kath was shortlisted as a finalist in the Volunteer of the Year Awards, and even more exciting news was Kath Burke was awarded one of the 5 Volunteer of the Year Awards. Well done, Kath, on a thorough, well-deserved awards recognition. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any councillors who also wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Getson?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I attended the conversation post at Smyesdale and Dereel. Also attended the Northern Streetscapes at Smyesdale, Scarsdale and Linton. And I also attended the graduation days at Ross Creek State School, Linton State School, Napoleon's State School, who had a magnificent Christmas carols out in the open, and Haddon Primary School, who have got about 265 children there and about 33 leaving to go to Ballarat this year. And that's all. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak to the report? Councillor Rowe?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, listen, I attended the Geelong Heritage
Excuse me, Councillor Rowe, could you speak into the microphone, please? Thank you.
Tonight, and I'm now.
It just as you walked up.
And presented the Merrell Award to Chelsea Liddycote on the evening. Also attended the online rating strategy consultation meeting, along with the rating strategy consultation meeting at Bannockburn, Daryl and Inverleigh as well. On Friday, the 3rd of December, I attended the CCTV steering committee meeting, and also I attended the Maud She Oaks Diglets Fun Day at Maud Recreation Reserve, and then finally I attended on Sunday the 12th of December the Sutherlands Creek and District annual Christmas party at the tennis club rooms, and witnessed the opening of a plaque to commemorate 50 years of participation in tennis at Sutherlands Creek. So, and I think there was that plaque was funded through council. So, thanks very much to the Golden Plain Shire Council for that. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Kirby was next.
Thank you, Mayor Gamble. Yeah, I'd just like to say that I attended the primary school in Rokewood for their Christmas awards day. It's always a great day to see the primary school children there, and especially when we're going through and talking about our role as councillors, and you know what council can do to for the children of the Shire. So I think they really do appreciate hearing what we do as councillors. Some of the other things was the online engagements with the ratepayers, with the rating strategy, the Colac Regional Advisory Group meeting, just to say that a lot of them around the region are experiencing very good rainfalls, good crops at the moment. It's going right up north into Victoria as well, so very happy to hear that farmers are doing extremely well at the moment. The Central Highlands Victoria meeting, I filled in for Mayor Gamble. Once again, a really good meeting happened. A little bit of talk around the table about some councils who might not be in close proximity to Ballarat and what their future may hold. But going forward, it's very positive because there is other regions that they might identify with. The Berrybank Community Engagement Committee meeting was another good one. That's with the wind farm and what's happening over there. It's just good to see that there's an active group making sure that the monies that have been accredited to both the Corangamite and the Golden Plain Shire councils are spending that money in a very wise and good manner. And one of the photos that we just seen recently was the bridge at Turtle Bend. So it's great to see the opening of that and where the money is being directed to. But once again, we also have residents in that vicinity who are very keen to have some local things happening around the Berrybank Wallenduck area, especially regarding their community planning. So I will be directing them to the new community engagement officer just to make sure that their voices are heard, because they are the ones who are very and mainly impacted over there at Wallenduck. The Active Ageing Inclusion and Advisory Group meeting was held last week. Once again, we have a really good mix of people who come along to that meeting from around the Shire. Some of the things we talked about was Bins for Blokes, volunteers and who's helping out at the moment. They will be running another course for volunteers as well, so it'll be good to see those numbers pick up now that COVID is sort of, we hope, is reducing a little bit, and we don't have as many cases around. The Golden Plains Shire Community Service Awards was another thing we spoke of. As well, one of our chaps who has a disability has been bringing up in the past, and he wasn't able to speak on it the other night, but it's about energy drinks and children, and about the labelling and the effects of those sort of drinks on children. So it's really good that Scott was able to bring that, has been able to bring that to the table, and we just need to be aware that these sort of drinks are not appropriate for underage children. Other than that, a lot of things are happening as well in the Aged and Disability Services area. They have in Inverleigh, they have an exercise group run by Hesse every Thursday, a seniors club, and they have Steady Feet at Meredith, along with a lot of other walking groups and that people can join in around the Shire. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby. Councillor Sharkey, you wish to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge that I attended the peri-urban group meeting, which was held both in Zoom and in Melbourne, so it was good to attend that. Brett Tassari has been renominated as the chair there, which is good for the region there. He's been in the chair a couple of years now, and that group has positioned itself extremely well now, heading into the into elections next year. So expecting some big results from them next year, and also attended several of the rating strategy discussion conversation posts, which will no doubt take some conversation later on tonight, but it was a good month. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. For myself, yes, it was a very busy time transitioning into the full role as Mayor, and in the agenda item there's quite a list, but many of these items are also covered in the Merrell Facebook page if people want to look further. But I'll just highlight a few of the events and functions and meetings that I've been involved in. The G21 Geelong Region Alliance Integrated Transport Strategy was held here in the Golden Plains, and it had there must have been like at least 60 to 80 people there, I'd say. And also attending the Goldfields World Heritage Bid, a pathway to regional regeneration that was held in Clunes. Deputy Mayor Kirby also was in attendance, and that was a great event for just getting a whole lot of mayors with a similar interest, not just mayors, but the local government people there, plus Dennis Napthine, and it was great to have that we're involved in this bid, because we have many of our northernmost towns such as Smearsdale, Linton, Garibaldi, right down to near Rokewood, surprisingly, but also towns like Steglitz, and so we have a lot of gold history in our shire, and to be part of this regional bid is fantastic for the shire, and hopefully will pay off into the future with increased tourism and recognition, recognising also our heritage, and we've got a lot to offer, including like our magnificent wineries. And I note that Lethbridge Winery a couple of weeks ago was awarded recognised as being in the top 50 contenders in Australia for best winery, which is, that's quite significant, and they're a high quality local business, just one of them. Other highlights include the Spring in the Shire at the Twilight Market. That was the busiest I've ever seen a market situation in Bannockburn, and it was great to be able to see everybody so happy and free at that stage, and let's hope we see a lot more of it. Also, I should note also the exhibition of the winning, or all the photographs submitted. I think there's about 76 of them from memory. They're all on exhibition in the Cultural Centre in Bannockburn. So if you have the time, it's great to go and have a look at the high quality entrants that are there. I've also been meeting quite a lot of politicians too. At that market it was Libby Coker and Catherine King, and I've met Stephanie Asher, I've met Christine Cousins. Frank Maguire was here for the skate park announcement, but unfortunately the progress of the development's been held up somewhat. Expectations are very high in the community with the kids that into skateboarding for it to be finished. They can't wait, and it should be really good when it is. So hopefully that'll be happening in January. We've also got, I also was part of the Merrell Induction, which was run by the Municipal Association, and that was quite interesting to see 50 mayors all together on Zoom, all shapes and sizes, and we're all completely different local governments and all together there, and it was a great learning experience. The speakers provided by the MAV were really good on just about everything you could think of. I'd also like to give special thank you to Deputy Mayor Kirby for her assistance, and also in covering me when conflicting events and helping me transition, and also senior management in the council and numerous officers too have made me feel quite welcome in the start of the role. So thank you. So we've spoken to the motion. Do we have who was the mover there? Sorry, I turned my page over and lost it there. Councillor Whitfield, would you like to close the debate, please?
Nothing further to add, thanks, Mr Mayor.
I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Now we move to item 7.9. The rating strategy propositions paper submissions. I'll now ask Director O'Sullivan to briefly introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor. The Local Government Act 2020 allows the revenue and rating strategy to be reviewed, and the aim was to review this in August 2021 with the aim to develop a rating strategy where the financial burden is shared equitably amongst ratepayers. Over the past 4 months, Council have held a number of workshops and a proposition paper was developed and placed on exhibition, which included 2 scenarios for consideration. Submissions for the public were invited with the closing date of 15th of December, with a total of 45 submissions received and with 10 requesting to speak to their submissions tonight. Following this meeting, the councillors will consider the submissions to help inform the rating strategy to be included in the 2022-23 draft budget. Thanks.
Thank you. The recommendation is the council receive receive and note the public submissions relating to the rating strategy propositions paper, and 2, hear the submissions from those requesting to address council in support of their submission lodged. Do I have a motion, please? Councillor Kirby. And a seconder, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Kirby, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'm very pleased to have the respondents speak tonight, and thank you all to the 45 submissions that we received as well. So looking forward to hearing them speak. It's all about the community, and that's why they're here tonight. Thank you.
And Councillor Cunningham, would you like to speak?
Mayor Gamble, yes, I just support Councillor Kirby's words. I'd also look forward to hearing from our speakers tonight, the residents, about their thoughts. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any councillors who'd like to speak against the motion? Any councillors who'd like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sharkey?
Thank you very much. it's a very. I know I've said it, and I'm going to repeat myself again. There's been some really good submissions through the process. So it does force us as councillors to rethink things and look at things from a different perspective. So if I was going to say anything negative about this process, I'd like to be now going into the part of having the discussion with the consultants after having consumed all of that information from the public. I think we as councillors would have better, robust discussions through the process, having received all the information. So there's some very good points in all of the submissions, and collectively some of those can make a lot of change. Fair to say that there has been a lot of dispute on the two options that we have put out to the public, and I'm of the opinion we as a collective, we as a group could have done a better job if we had been ahead, received this community feedback. So hopefully we can address things next year and look to go forward. So looking forward to hearing all the submissions. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to the motion? Okay, Councillor Kirby, would you like to close the debate, please? Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. First on the list of speakers, we have David from Batesford. Okay. Stephen Condon from Batesford is here virtually. Great.
Stephen, can you hear us? Stephen, can you hear us?
While we're waiting for Stephen,
sorry, I'm here. Apologies.
Just before you start, Stephen, I'll just remind you that there's that you have 5 minutes maximum for those presenting, and to assist presenters with this, a timer will be displayed. There will be a bell sound when you are nearing the maximum time allowed, and 2 bells will sound when your time has expired. You will then be asked to conclude your presentation. 2 minutes will then be allocated for councillors to ask questions of the presenter. I note that this is not a time for debate. Presenters, please be reminded that the content of your presentation should not be a repetition of the written submission. Myself and my fellow councillors have read each written submission carefully. Your presentation tonight should provide further supporting information and expand upon the issues raised in your submission. So, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, councillors. So I must admit, I've just been caught off a foot there. I wasn't too sure if I was repeating my paperwork or not. Perhaps I could just pull out some of the salient points, given that I haven't had a moment to provide further evidence, if that's okay.
Yep.
Excuse me if I'm too loud. I'll just turn it down a bit. So in short, I'll just pick out some of the points. Essentially, I have asked to see the 22 proposals, which I'd love to see to ensure that this is a process that can be endorsed. Personally, I don't think there's enough evidence to support why these proposals are the best. I did speak with a couple of the councillors at Bannockburn Party. The treatment of land now seems unfair given the property market. It impacts, and that's my position. Sorry, I should start. Basically, I've just bought a parcel of land in Batesford for a sum of $835,000, which is in the public domain. For the rates purposes, it would value the land at roughly $1.7 million, which I think far exceeds potentially a lot of the other residents that live around me, if not the same. especially when I've got a parcel of land that I can't do anything with. So just getting back to that point, so my stance is just the treatment of land at this point in time. Given the property market is buoyant across, I think, Victoria as a whole, and it seems to be just as buoyant in the Gold Plains Shocker. The impacts that you're proposing will hit first home buyers all the way through to pensioners, regardless of wealth. So I don't think there's been much due diligence considered in that respect. I think the rates valuations that consultants used are largely stale. Looking at that cohort of distribution between CID values, they seem to be very skewed towards the lower end of the spectrum. Another thing that I'm a little bit confused about is businesses, farms seem to be traded favourably, and I appreciate Golden Shire has a lot of farming properties, but I'm not too sure why they get such a favourable treatment, given that a lot of their rates are tax deductible. All businesses are these days. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, I estimate my rates bill, if it goes ahead, to be significantly higher than the majority of people in my street, if not the same. And just trying to understand how this is equitable. That's me done.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Are there any questions from councillors? Okay, we'll hear the next speaker. Stuart Hamilton from Inverleigh. I believe he's here. Stuart? We met Stuart on the at our rating consultation in Inverleigh. So welcome again.
All right, thank you. Very nervous. Sorry, first time I've done this. Yeah, I'm a farmer, local farmer from Inverleigh. Obviously, I'm opposed to our rates differential going up. Obviously, in every aspect of land housing and whatnot through the whole Shire and through the whole state, the increase in land value will significantly increase our rates anyway. So I feel that that's probably enough for everyone, really. I pay my residential rates like everyone else. We are rated on our housing, residential housing, and then we are rated on top of that with the farm. A major majority of the local farms in this Shire anyway would be family owned. Although like the previous speaker said, the rates are fully tax deductible. I mean, that's great as long as you're making a profit. I'm probably not opposed to making a big sing and dance about our rates being too high and whatnot. I'd just like to see some more results from our rates, perhaps, particularly the roads. Hugely important critical infrastructure for us on farms and really everyone in the Shire. We use them every day, and I feel that you know, certainly I suppose you could say, I don't want to cause a divide, but certainly out of town our roads are deteriorating, and it'd be really great to see the road maintenance keep up with the technology and whatnot of the farm equipment and whatnot being driven on the roads. So that's probably all I have to say. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Well said. Is there any questions to Stuart? Councillor Kirby?
Hi, I'm just wondering how bad are your roads deteriorating, because we don't always get to the back roads, and it's always good to hear what's really happening, and
Yep.
especially since harvest has just been happening as well.
So, I mean, and specifically Wingill Road's the big one for us, but also, you know, like the Shelford Meredith Road, great to see that improving. They're to the point where I believe they're probably dangerous. The drop off off the bitumens, you know, 3 to 4 inches, which can pull the steering wheel of the farm trucks and whatnot. But without being a signage of a speed limit, most of the trucks are down to 50 to 60 kilometres an hour along the Wingill Road, just because it's too hard on gear. We farm in probably 5 different shires, and certainly getting roadworks out of the Golden Plains is by far the hardest to get some action out of it. Yeah.
Thank you for your response.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Rowe.
I've just got a question. Maybe one of the officers. Why haven't we got more gazetted B double road accesses in the Shire for some of these farmers?
Sorry, Councillor Rowe.
I'm just asking the question, like Mr Hamilton here mentioned about more gazetted B double road access for farmers. Why isn't there more?
My understanding is B double gazettal happens upon applications by operators and B double operators, and we assess each one through the National Heavy Vehicle Register process as applied. But I can take that on notice and get some further advice too.
I was going to say, from experience, it is extremely difficult to get a permit through the Golden Plains Shire. Very much so from the point of view of the carriers. If you farm on that specific road, that is a lot easier. But if you are a commercial carrier in the district, it's a pretty painful process. Our permits go to the NHVR, come back to Golden Plains, possibly get rejected, go back to NHVR, come back to us. So there's that very missing link between the who we apply to and who actually makes the decision. So.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. We'll have to keep it back on the rates.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right. You're answering a question. Okay, thank you. So next on our list we have Mr. Cameron Steele to call in virtually. Welcome, Cameron.
Thank you. So thank you to you, Mr. Mayor, and councillors for the opportunity to speak to my submission. I will admit I'm a little caught out like Stephen. What I'm about to say is a bit of a rehash of my submission, but there are other parts to it. Firstly, I'd like to express my support for the initiative of numerous councillors and staff to flag a wind back of what I deem an embarrassingly high municipal charge. Most councils in Victoria don't use one at all, deeming it a flat and regressive tax and one that impacts low value properties. The City of Great Geelong got rid of their municipal charge last year, having acknowledged its impact on low value properties, and the Surf Coast committed to keep theirs at 10% total rates revenue, which is in line with the maximum recommended by the State Local Government Act review. When South Gippsland Shire phased this out a few years ago, they said, it is a reasonable assumption that those living in lower value properties are also on lower incomes and hence have the less capacity to pay. For this reason, Council resolved to abolish the municipal charge. Ours, however, sits at a whopping 15.5%, one of the highest in the state. The decision to claw it back to 12.5% doesn't go far enough in my opinion, but it's a welcome start. It does need to be capped at the recommended 10% at the very least. This doesn't take away from the fact that we are a very high rating shire. In my opinions, councillors have direct opportunity to ease the residential rate burden for all residents. The shire is lucky enough to be hosting existing and developing wind farms. The income streams for these should be for a good part directed at relieving the residential rate burden, so that the municipal charge can be further wound back while all properties can receive rate reductions. I do acknowledge that there are issues around some of our properties not being properly captured their true value. But that's something I would encourage council to work on. Councils like the Pyrenees Shire and the Moorabool Shire record wind farm revenue directly in their rates tables. Golden Plains should do that too, rather than considering just part of other monetary contributions. As this source increases, residential rates should be allowed to be eased. I encourage councillors to ensure this happens. I would further encourage councillors to continue to explore other means of taking pressure off residential rates. The initiative a couple of years ago to rate intensive farming enterprises differently to broadacre farms is one such example. There are other avenues. In my opinion, the Baw Shire's residential development rate of 130% should be seriously looked at, given the high rate of new developments in our shire. This could serve to recoup the cost to ratepayers of new infrastructure supporting these developments and further tackle rate burden. Properly directed, these should assist in driving down residential rates for all rather than favouring or disadvantaging particular communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any councillors that would like to ask questions of Cameron Steele? Mr. Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. I'm just wondering if you could just fill us in a little bit more about the residential rate that you were talking about from Baw, please.
Yes, my understanding is the Baw rate, which is set at 130%, is on properties which are being earmarked for development. I think they set the minimum to be over 2 hectares, so that doesn't capture the mum and dad subdivisions. At the moment, I think they have 8 development properties which are caught under that rate umbrella. I'm not too sure on what that would equate to the Golden Plains, but I feel Golden Plains Shire, with the amount of development that's happening around the Shire, it's something I think council and councillors should seriously look at.
Yeah, just on that, Mr. Steele, I believe we did have one in our last rating strategy, and it was removed for areas that were going to be future development. So I think it's something that could come back to the table, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharkey.
Thank you very much. Just to confirm that, Mr. Steele, is that Baw identify 8 properties out of about 40,000 properties?
Look, if you look at their rating tables, there's, whether it's particular properties or whether it's groups of properties, I'm unsure. I don't know, but certainly it's the number flagged within them is 8. I would assume that they're individual developments, but given we seem to have forgone some development contributions in the Shire, I think this seems to be a sensible way of picking up the money that we've forgone recently, collecting from developers. As you know, I've heard many times from council officers that developments do cost ratepayers money, and it takes quite a while to recoup that. I think this is a sensible avenue to explore for the council.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Whitfield.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Mr. Steele. You mentioned some of our rateable properties not being captured accurately, and I think you were referring to perhaps intensive farming. Can you elaborate on what you mean there, please?
Look, it wasn't specifically intensive farming, although I do think there's an issue with that. If you look at the position paper, I think it flagged 8 intensive farms over $1 million. You know, looking around the Shire, there's, I would say, you know, with all the broiler farms and all the wineries and all the rest of it, I just find you know, a little bit hard to understand that we've only have 8 operations worth over $1 million. I think that needs to be better explored. I know that there may be some small cost in really interrogating those figures, but that would be a once-off. And once those are put onto a registry, I think that's a source of revenue. I also think that I think in conversation with Councillor Sharkey at the Twilight Fair, he did mention properties really were escaping a proper valuation for whatever reason. And I think that could be looked at as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Steele. Our next submitter is Charles Everest, also attending virtually. Not at the moment. Okay, we'll move on now to David Evans, ex-councillor, and he's here in person. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Basically, the rating strategy, equitable, that's the thing that we have to keep in mind. And one of the things that we do not have in Shire is equitable rates. Now, if we look at the situation with the average income in Victoria, which is $86,000, then we look at the situation. I've been graphing the trend in the rates, the average rate in this Shire in every category over 13 years. Over that time, the average wage has risen by 42%. But for the farm rate, it has risen 82%. For the residential, it has risen between 225 and 250%. Now, if you can possibly say that we have an equitable rating system, it is as far away from it as it could possibly be. The system is broken. The people carrying the load in this Shire are the residents who have to pay their rate after they pay their taxes. The rates are a land tax, which is a tax after a tax, okay? And they're getting hard at it. It's getting harder and harder. This Shire, among the G21 councils, has the highest family violence in the G21. Now, this is a quite silent reminder to us all that we are a growth Shire. Many of the residents out here have come out to this Shire to get a roof over their head under extreme mortgage stress and paying extraordinary rates just to keep a roof over their head. If we don't do something about this, this is going to eventuate into a social problem in this Shire, which we will all carry forward for a long, long time. If you're going to try to solve a problem, get in early. Now, running at the way we are now, we need to address this problem. Everybody has spoken about different things. We are quite comfortable with rating the business properties, commercial properties, under these tables, 200%. But a farm, which is still only a business, is still given a concession. Now, the fundamental thing about any business, if you're not successful in it and you can't make a profit, and trust me, the Victorian farmers lately are making very good profits on their farms. If they cannot run that business properly, get the hell out, okay? It's the same for every business. They get extreme advantage over the ratepayer, and the ratepayer is carrying this Shire on an increasing trend. Fundamentally, the system is broken. We need to come up with a system whereas the residents in this Shire are guaranteed that they will only pay a percentage increase. the cap, okay? Forget about the valuation. Just multiply last year's rate by the gap that the government sets. Everybody gets the same treatment. Now, it's not perfect, it's not a solution, but it's towards equity. The problem now is the absolutely unbelievable trend in increasing land value, which has never happened in this country ever before. We have a major problem coming at us and we're not dealing with it. The federal and the state governments have their head up their arse on this one. Sorry for the swearing, but this is serious situation that we're in. This council, if it has the courage, adopt that system, okay? Keep your differentials as they are, send them off to the government for approval, but don't use the cents in the dollar per property value. Just multiply last year's rate by the cap, okay? Everybody are then in a position that we all share the load. And it's one of the things that Australians are always said, when things are tough, we work together. Share. At the moment, it's not. And it's been going on for too long. So fundamentally, I'm saying have the courage to put option 1 and 2 in the basket and adopt this procedure. You can only win if you give it a go. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Mr Evans, for presenting tonight. We know over the years you've been very forthcoming at being a ratepayer who's always been at the forefront of knowing a lot about rates, and thanks, we do appreciate that. The only problem is it's all right to say to put a cap on, but at the end of the day, higher value properties do see an increase in what their value is, and lower houses don't always have such a high value. How do you really think that we could propose to put a cap on it without having valuations on properties? Because it is a wealth tax.
Well, basically, under the legislation, we have to use the CIV, okay? No problem about that. The latest government review on rating was a farce, okay, totally. It was an absolute piece of rubbish. It didn't try to address any of the issues. All it done was rubber stamp it. Now, in the situation of values, I've got no problem. The value at the moment is the starting point, okay? But we don't let the value over the next 4 years keep having an impact. So as the revaluations come in and all of a sudden 10 people come in and bid up your area, you don't get that result of that increase because we used the valuation back at a set time and all we've done is multiply that by 1 point, whatever the cap is for the rate, okay? So essentially you only pay what you paid last year plus the percentage of the cap. Now with that, that gives everybody a little bit of certainty going forth. They can afford to live in their house, they know what's going to happen. The valuer can come in and double your value, but it's not going to affect your rate under this system. But there will be a time where that has to change. It'll change when the property is sold because a new owner is coming in, there'll be a new value added, it'll then be set to that. And it continues on. But that owner is coming in knowing full well that that system is there. And with that, they take responsibility for it, not the neighbours. Because at the moment, somebody comes in, pays twice the market value, all of the neighbours pay for that. And that's their problem. And that's why the state government, with that rating review, was an absolute farce. There was proposals put up. I put up 2 proposals. I think Sharkey also put up one. There would have been multiple other proposals put up by other submitters across the state, and not one word in that report of any of those proposals was put in that report. And that is what we needed. We needed a new system to deal with this problem, because fundamentally everybody is merely trying to keep their family under a roof and fed.
Thank you, Mr Evans.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mayor Gamble. Evening, Mr Evans. Can I just ask, under your process you're putting forward there, what would you do with the vacant land, broadacre farming and business? Would you leave those rating differentials as they are?
Well, I think the vacant land in rate that we have in this shire, I've always thought it was absolutely terrible rate. It is one of the highest in the state, unbelievably high, 200% differential. And I understand that it's there to encourage people not to just sit on the land bank, but most of this occurs on the single allotment in a subdivision, and a person may not be ready to move out to build on that subdivision for a few years. But if they put in a planning permit, that should be a trigger to lower that differential. And once they put in their building permit, again, it should trigger it to come back down. Because you can be paying, as the very first presenter tonight said, $1.7 million for a vacant block. That's just absolutely cruel to anybody. And we really need to have that flexibility. We have to do it on a case-by-case basis. The planning team will know what they're doing there. They'll understand the situation. Of course, the big land bankers are put in another category. And basically, you've got to be fair. These are going to be our residents, but from the minute they purchase that land, they are part of our rate base. And we don't want them coming into our shire with not in their guts from the beginning. And that is exactly what that does. I do not support in any way increasing that from 200 to 220%. I think you should have that graduation down scaling during its course of its run until the house is fully established on the property and the person has moved into our shire. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharkey, did you have a question? Okay, sorry. Are there any other questions? Councillor Wright.
Yeah. Thanks there, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Mr Evans. I just see there where you made mention just recently there where you have to feed your family. Well, I'll tell you what about it. You won't feed your family if you haven't got farmers.
Look, it doesn't matter. If you're making a statement like that, you won't be able to grow a crop if you haven't got a tractor.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. This is a moment for questions, in my understanding, not statements. There was no question from Councillor Rowe.
Do you have a question, Councillor Rowe?
No, that was all. Just want to make a statement. Be heard.
Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you, David. I believe we've got Charles online virtually. Okay, welcome, Charles.
Good evening. Should I begin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Charles Evans and I'm Senior Policy Advisor with the Victorian Farmers Federation, and I'm responsible for managing the VFS response to local government rating strategies and the rating system. On behalf of local funding, thanks for the opportunity to present councils this evening. From the outset, I do want to highlight that council consultation on rating strategy review couldn't have come at a more difficult time of the year for the farm community, with many farmers of harvest. We would respectfully that the timing of this consultation disenfranchise the local farming community, many farmers totally unfair proposals that have been cancelled, and that's why the FF is representing them tonight. Council has presented to the community as if it only has two options to choose from, but in fact there are three, with the first and most sound option being not to change Council's current rating strategy. Farmers do not support any option while farm categories or to reduce the minimum charge. Nowhere has Council justified the need to adjust farm differentials, particularly in light of the fact that the average farm family in the Shire paying over $11,000 rates each year. Under the guidelines for differential rating, Council is required to consider the use of a differential rate for farmers. This is in recognition of the fact that the rating system disenfranchises most that taxes only one form of wealth, and that being real property. Doesn't tax share, doesn't tax superannuation, doesn't tax saving, doesn't tax profit, doesn't tax income. The ministerial guideline also acknowledges the fact that farmers have less access to and receive fewer services and ratepayers, and this point is embedded in the ministerial guidelines. For example, we've tonight already the strong concern with grain growers as to the lack of female access to the shop. Farmers are missing out on services that matter to them. It must also be acknowledged that foregone rate revenue is not spent by farmers on a holiday to Bali, reinvested in the business to become more sustainable, drought resilient, and ultimately to create local jobs. In addition to the farm differential, I also wanted to make remarks on the minimum charge. The VFF agrees with the view that has been put before Council that municipal charge is somehow opposed to the equity principles set out in the Local Government Act, when the Act itself allows for the municipal charge up to a level of 20% of the total general rate of charge. In fact, the importance of the municipal charge was acknowledged by the state government following the 2019 rating system review, when it abandoned its plan to cut the maximum level of the municipal charge to 2% of general rates. The municipal charge is in fact an equity measure because it helps to offset against the variability of property values and valuation asymmetry between properties. And until the rating system is changed to implement minimum and maximum rates, which incidentally is the position of the MAV, Council should not make any change to the municipal charge. The VFF strongly recommends Council does not take up either option 1 or 2 as presented. And Council wants to ensure fairness between rating categories, as the gentleman earlier was pointing to. Then it should look at what was recently implemented in the Ararat and Mansfield Shires. In closing, I note that VFF acknowledges the difficulties rural councils have in maintaining fiscal balance due to the inequities of rate capping, cost shifting, the fundamental fact that ratepayers in regional Victoria pay more in rates than those in Melbourne, both as a percentage of the value of the property and a percentage of their income. VFF is committed to ending this disparity, and we would welcome working Dr. Plain Shire into the future to achieve a fairer rate system for all ratepayers. Thanks for your time, and if time permits, happy to take any questions. If not, Councillor, welcome to contact the VFF and myself directly.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Are there any questions, councillors? Okay, thank you. Our next presenter is Russell. Sorry, it's just got Russell here.
It doesn't seem that long ago that I was here speaking on a similar issue about supporting farm differential rate for farmers to council. So as mentioned in my submission, we pay rates in the Golden Plains Shire, and that is the base rate without the municipal charges or garbage collection added to that, and pay rates in another adjoining shire also. Rate increases in the farming zone have been relatively stable in recent years, and that's occurred because of the rate capping. Prior to that, there was some very hefty rate increases in many parts of the shire, 50 and 60% in some years. The municipal planning strategy recognised the importance of agricultural land and associated farming activities, and Council aims to support sustainable agriculture and the shire, and to protect the role of agriculture land as an economically valuable resource. So I think that's a fairly important point to take on board. Land sales in farm areas has been very strong, as has been mentioned previously. I'd just like to elaborate a little bit on that. I mean, some of these prices have been quite excessive, and in many cases it's been bought by traditional, well, not traditional farmers, but farmers with other investment streams. So they've been pushing these land prices to the limit, and whilst that's been occurring, it's great to it's great that they recognise the valuable resource it is in terms of buying into farming land. But it's been making it quite difficult for younger farmers, traditional farmers, to buy in. And any significant rate increases will impact particularly on young farming families who, like many young families, have all the imposts of living and day-to-day activities with their families and that as well. So that could impact quite significantly on some young families. The rates that most farmers pay over the last few years has been impacted. It's been one of the biggest increasing costs in farming inputs in the last 8 to 10 years. So it does have an impact on their earning capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Russell. Are there any questions? Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Code. Yeah, just regarding farming families, most families do live out a lot further than in close to mainstream cities. So, for example, Ballarat, Geelong, Colac. So at the end of the day, your fuel bills and that sort of thing would be quite expensive, and even if you had young families, the cost of running those children in and out of sport or going to school would be quite high. Would you not say that?
Absolutely, I agree 100% as well, and particularly you've seen the state of some of our side roads, and I know I'm getting off topic a little bit, but it is important to rural ratepayers that their roads as a valuable amenity to their communities, so they can take their children to places and not be blowing tyres out in potholes, which happened to us just recently as well. So the road issue and the rate issue, or the roads in particular, is probably the most important amenity for any rural family.
Thank you, Mr. Code.
Any further questions? Councillor Rowe.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, thanks very much, Russell, for tonight. You just mentioned there in the last 8 to 10 years, you mentioned that rates has been some of your highest costs. I'm just wondering, without a farming differential or the farming rates going up, will you find it hard to continue on farming if that's the case?
That's a pretty difficult question for me to answer. I've been farming for 50 plus years, so I'll be continuing to do that for a number of years now, and particularly with having the next couple of generations coming on. So we'll certainly continue to farm, I believe, and we've been through some major cost imposts over many years, whether it's interest rates or rate increases and all that sort of thing. But I think we, as a farming family, I think we'll continue to work as hard as we can and keep our farming lifestyle going as long as we possibly, or farming life going on as long as we possibly can. So, but certainly any impost on your input cost it hurts. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Russell. Now we have Jane from Batesford. Welcome, Jane.
I actually put in 2 submissions, one related to the community of Batesford and their passive spaces. Excuse my voice, I've got a bit of hay fever. And another one around the rates, and so I'll try and address those. The council established a rate structure comprising of property values, user pays and the municipal charge. Striking that proper balance in these elements has provided, I think, equity in the distribution of rates across the council. The Victorian response to the local government rating system review, which was held in 2020, was to retain the ability for councils to provide lower differential rates for farming properties and set municipal charges to 20% of the total rates. The government thought that this would address the huge population growth in areas where there's, and Golden Plains certainly has had a population explosion of sorts, and address the farmers in the councils. Properties in growth townships with increasing property values will continue to pay much higher rates and increases than properties in other areas of Golden Plains. Places like Batesford will always end up, as long as they keep selling the way they are, they will end up paying more rates. Consideration of these factors and to make the system fairer, the council in 2019 decreased the rate revenue which was distributed on property values and increased the revenue and the fixed municipal charge, which I thought was a positive way of making everybody feel like that they were paying for the services provided by the council. I have difficulty with us coming back 18 months later or even a year later and saying that the decision made by the council then is now considered unfair. And so are we to assume that each time the council makes a decision, in the next year it can be overturned and can be considered fair or unfair depending on your point of view? Also in the Golden Plains budget report, which is what I'm quoting from, it's in the 98 pages, Batesford was not mentioned once, which was really disappointing as a Batesford resident. In 2020, the 26 Golden Plains annual report stated that council, council completed a significant rating strategy review and instituted new measures to reduce the fluctuating rates, which is what we've had other people talking about, that have those fluctuating rates burden across the Shire. A fairer municipal charge and streamlined rating strategies and revised rates program delivered the businesses more reliable rates bills and delivered was delivered in a firm commitment by this council. I read the rate structure review, which is the recent one, the November 21. On page 2 of the rate structures review propositions, the community was asked to consider the financial impact of each of the following 2 options on section 7, which are the ones that we've been discussing, of this paper against the status quo and rank them, including the status quo. And according to which one was considered most fair and equitable. The status quo wasn't put out there as an option. And if the structure review said that it should have been, perhaps it should have been, and this consultation process would have been seen as more of a consultation process. On page 13, section 7, the financial impact on ratepayers completely ignores the Batesford community contribution by citing options 1 and 2 indicating the rates modelling around residential Bannockburn and residential other, and doesn't come anywhere near addressing rates in Batesford between 3,500 to 5,500. I just think that it's totally ignored that aspect. I understand that residents of Batesford are going to be contributed disproportionately to cover revenue no longer covered, or are we going to go to the farmers for it? I mean, to me, it seems much fairer to consider going to every ratepayer rather than singling out groups. There's been discussion during the meeting with councillors regarding expectations. The first decrease is an aim to abolish the charge entirely. Does the council intend for the future, or should we have that as part of this discussion? If that is the plan for the future to abolish it, and this is step 1, should we not be transparent and clear with our community about that direction and whether or not that's the direction that council are going? On page 15, the benchmarking seeks to compare the council making reference to notes regarding perceived differences. On the council government Know Your Council website, they didn't consider the Golden Plains to be a like council with Geelong, Ballarat or Hepburn when comparing municipal charges. And they failed to include the ones that are considered like, and that's Mitchell Shire, East Gippsland, Moy Shire, South Grampians, Macedon Ranges, Campaspe Shire and Moyne Shire, which all have municipal charges. So I really think that should have been a consideration to include those. Any move to remove the differential municipal charge will not equalise the burden of rates for farmers or for people who live in areas of great growth. That's
Jane, have you got a concluding comment there?
If the council move to increase rates in places like Batesford, perhaps they should move to include Batesford in their annual report and in their budgeting process, and provide the community with some of the services within that community that are very evident in places like Bannockburn and Teesdale.
Okay, thank you. Are there any councillors who've got questions? Councillor Kirby.
Hi, thank you for submitting tonight. I'm just wondering if you're part of the Batesford Community Planning Group.
I am.
Great, because we really don't hear enough about Batesford as a councillor group, and it'd be really good to know what things you're wanting down there, because, for example, I know in the past, we've heard that you don't have a football oval or a tennis court at this side of the river, not the other side. But at the end of the day, it's up to the individuals within the township sometimes to want to start a football club or start a soccer club, and that's sort of not council's responsibility, but it's up to the ratepayers, to really put their hand up and say, we've got a committee, we would like to see a football oval in Batesford. So, as a council, our hands are tied as to what we could probably offer you in a big way when you start comparing Batesford to Bannockburn, for example. So it's sometimes a little bit unrealistic when you do live in an area like most, say 50, at least 40 of the other townships within the Shire who have the same aspirations as you guys, but they sort of realise that they don't actually have a town centre, so it's really hard to have, you know, things where you could go just 10 minutes up the road and everything's on your doorstep.
I really think that I've been part of, as soon as I moved to Batesford, I looked for a community to become a part of and join the community group. And that's a long time ago. And when the community group got together and decided they wanted things, one of the main things they wanted was a playground. So it took 15 years for us to get a playground. I don't think that that's okay. I just don't. 15 years.
I don't think it was so much
that. It was 15 years.
I think we'd better steer it back to rates. There any other questions on the rates? Any other questions for Jane? Okay, well, thanks for your submission, Jane. Lastly, I think we have Peter. Right. Okay, well, I think that concludes the submitters. So we have a mover, Councillor Kirby, seconder, Councillor Cunningham. Mover, do you wish to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to thank all the submitters for presenting tonight. We had a good diverse range from the farming community to residential and also to areas in the Shire that that are on properties but do not have a lot of services within that township. So thank you all for submitting and we'll take it on board. Thanks.
Now put the motion. Those in favour? Motion carried. So I'd like to also add thank you to all the submitters on behalf of all the councillors. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to item 7.2. Thank you, Councillor Sharkey.
Do we know what the reason is? We haven't been given that.
Item 7.2, 17 O'Connor Road, Lethbridge, two-lot subdivisions. I'll ask Director Josipovic to briefly introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report relates to a planning permit application for the development of land for the purposes of a two-lot subdivision at 17 O'Connor Road in Lethbridge. The report provides councillors with the background to the application and a summary of the relevant planning considerations. The application has been referred to the council meeting for determination because an officer of the statutory planning team has a financial interest in the subject site. There are no objections to the application. The councillors have been provided with a full copy of the application for consideration prior to making the decision. The site is located in a low-density residential zone of the Lethbridge Township and contains an existing dwelling and outbuildings and has a total area of approximately 5 hectares. The land is flat and mostly cleared except for planted vegetation. The site is bounded by O'Connor Road to the east and Noyes Road to the south, both of which are gravel all-weather roads. The Geelong-Ballarat Railway line forms the north-east boundary of the land. There are no restrictive covenants applying to the land. As mentioned, the application proposes a two-lot subdivision, one to contain the existing dwelling and outbuildings with an area of about 3.5 hectares, and the second lot to be a vacant lot with an area of about 1.6 hectares. The recommendation is that Council resolve to issue a planning permit for a two-lot subdivision at 17 O'Connor Road, Lethbridge, subject to the conditions attached to the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Cunningham. And a seconder, please. Councillor Whitfield. Councillor Cunningham, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor Gamble. Yeah, as there was no objections to the planning application from any adjoining neighbours or owners and occupiers, I'm comfortable with supporting the council officer's recommendation to issue a planning permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any councillors who'd like to speak against this motion?
Just regarding the subject road, the road going to the property, I'm just wondering if that is a fully made road or is it just partially a gravel road leading to that property?
Yeah, gravel roads.
It is a gravel road,
Yep.
so is it fully formed?
Yes, that's my understanding, yes. So there's no works required on the roads because both lots will have access to existing public roads.
And is there any provisions for footpaths or anything like that in that subdivision?
No, not in that two-lot subdivision of 1.6 hectares or so. We don't believe there's any need for a footpath at this point. It's a two-lot subdivision.
Just going forward in the future, I'd just hate to have to see council have to come back and maybe put a footpath or, you know, redo the road if there's if the road needs upgrading at all.
Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on the motion? Councillor Cunningham, do you wish to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Gamble. No, nothing else to add to my previous comments. Thank you.
In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. We'll wait for Councillor Sharkey to rejoin us. So, item 7.3, Amendment C92 Gpla, Teesdale Structure Plan, Planning Panel Outcome. I'll ask Director Josipovic to briefly introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In April 2020, Council adopted the Teesdale Structure Plan and authorised officers to prepare and exhibit an amendment to incorporate that structure plan within the Golden Plains planning scheme, which is now known as Amendment C92 GPLA. The amendment proposes to delete the old 1997 structure plan map and replace it with a new one, and it includes the key directions from the Teesdale Structure Plan to now be in the Golden Plains planning scheme. The key elements of the amendment and structure plan are all summarised in the report before you tonight. The amendment was exhibited from November 26, 2020 to January 25th, 2021, and 23 submissions were received. On that basis, a planning panel was held to attempt to resolve the submissions. The planning panel took place virtually on 10th and 11th of June of 2021, with the panel delivering their report to Council on the 27th of July. The planning panel report recommends that the amendment be abandoned. The key reason for this, according to the panel, is that there isn't enough analysis to underpin the proposed northeast growth precinct in terms of a whole range of factors. They say there is far more analysis needed in terms of a detailed flora and fauna assessment, flooding assessment, infrastructure analysis, etc. The assessments needed would likely require a great deal of input from professional consultants at a significant cost to Council. Council officers disagree that it is appropriate to undertake extensive further work to justify the Teesdale Structure Plan at this point. The main reason for this is that the growth precinct is already depicted in two places within the Golden Plains planning scheme, and an application for rezoning for this area could be lodged today. The Teesdale Structure Plan of 2020 proposes to provide clarity around how the precinct could be developed, as opposed to identifying it for development for the first time. The types of assessments recommended by the panel are really appropriate to identifying a new growth precinct. So council staff, in consultation with the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, have developed a way forward that involves continuing with the amendment with some modifications, such as changing the labelling of the growth precinct to be a future growth investigation area and to specify the particular investigations in the planning scheme. This means that the growth precinct would not be guaranteed for rezoning, and detailed investigations will need to be undertaken for the precinct before it could be rezoned. Typically, these investigations will be undertaken by any proponent. In practice, it's likely to be a fairly similar outcome because the 2020 structure plan in the form that was exhibited already didn't guarantee rezoning and the whole area and specified a number of requirements before council would consider a rezoning proposal. Having gone through the panel process, council is now in a position to make a decision on the amendment. For the reasons given and also detailed in the report, council officers don't recommend abandoning the amendment. Therefore, it has been recommended that the amendment with modifications be submitted to the Minister for approval. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Josipovic, please? So, do I have a motion? I need to move a Councillor Cunningham. And a seconder, please. Councillor Kirby. Councillor Cunningham, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor Gamble. Once again, I'm reading through the information that was given to us and further discussions. I'm comfortable with supporting Councillors' Officer's recommendation to adopt the applicable C92 Gpla plan in form recommended, with approval then being requested from the Minister for Planning. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any councillors who wish to speak against the motion? Are there any councillors who wish to speak on the motion, to the motion? Councillor Kirby?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has been on the table for a couple of years now. I was really pleased to actually see in the report, one of the things that they did highlight was an economic development area within the report that I did bring up originally in council. We know that Teesdale is a growing area, and even though it does have a few little services in the town, I think once you start putting in quite a few hundred more residents, there should be scope for more economic development within that township. I know it is very close to Bannockburn, but you know, if some of the smaller services, it could be some small shops or you know, retail, that sort of thing that could be accommodated, would be a good thing in the area. As we know, Golden Plains is recognised as a tradie shire, and I'm sure there is a lot of tradespeople within the Teesdale area, and you know, it could go a long way in making sure that there is areas for tradespeople in the future that might be able to accommodate by having a small shed or something if it's too close to their neighbours, for example. But I do look forward to. I'm glad the council has renamed it, re-looked at it, and it is going back out. So happy to support. Thank you.
Anybody else who'd like to speak on the motion? Okay, Councillor Cunningham, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Gamble. No, nothing else to add to my previous comments. Thank you.
In which case I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 7.4. Amendment CXXX, removal of planning permit triggers for outbuildings in low density residential and rural living zone. Sorry. I'll ask Director Josipovic to briefly introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By way of background, in 2008, General Amendment C39 introduced a control for outbuilding sizes, including sheds, requiring permits for any sheds over 120 square metres. This was done at the same time as correcting some ordnance and mapping anomalies. This amendment had minimal advertising, and it was generally advertised in the Golden Plains Mirror, Geelong Advertiser and Ballarat Courier, and received 9 submissions, none of which were related to the outbuilding size. The reason that specific size was chosen is unclear to officers based on the reports that we have at hand. It does say in the explanatory report of C39, the introduction of setbacks and outbuilding requirements in the rural residential zone may create the need for some extra permits, but the main goal of the proposed changes is to encourage people to build within these specified limits to avoid a planning permit. In that context, the number of applications that have been caused by the permit trigger are increasing, as is the proportion of total applications. In 2019-20, Council received 146 planning permit applications for sheds. This equated to 35% of all the planning permit applications received for that financial year. In 2020-21, 222 permits were applied for under these controls, equating to 44% of all the planning permit applications for that year. In the current calendar year, up to 20th of October, there were 197 applications. This is an increase of 20% on the previous full year numbers. In the past 3 years, only 1 application for a shed was refused, and that was due to insufficient information being provided. The cost of a permit application is a minimum of $638.80, and where advertising is required, that will rise to $983.90. Department of Environment, Water, Land and Planning's Regional Planning Hub conducted analysis of a random sample of applications that were required due to the schedules to the rural living zone and low density rural zone, and found that 81% were due to outbuildings larger than 120 square metres. Only 3 required advertising and none received objections. So the request and the recommendation is to the Council authorise the preparation and exhibition of an amendment to the Golden Plains planning scheme to remove the triggers requiring planning permits for outbuildings larger than 120 square metres on land in the rural living zone and the low density residential zone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? In which case, do I have a mover for the motion, please?
Thank you very much, Mayor Gamble.
Councillor Sharkey.
Thank you very much. I'd like to put forward an alternative recommendation. The alternative recommendation that I'm putting forward is the same as the officer recommendation, with the inclusion there of number 2, which is if there is no objections, the process then will go straight to the Minister. Happy to speak to that if someone wants to move. Second that.
Okay, is there a seconder for this recommendation? Councillor Whitfield.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gamble. This is something that will hopefully be a straightforward process. We are looking at streamlining this services, and as the Director outlined there, this was introduced in 2008 with the hope of reducing shed sizes or keeping them there and having an effect there on residents to keep them under the 120 square metres. But as is evident now, many people are choosing to have larger sheds as they move out to our rural acreage. There is not that many objections coming in. So for someone putting a shed up that spends tens of thousands of dollars doing so, the additional burden of a cost of between $638 and $980 is quite significant. So I do think that this will be well received by the community. I foresee that we won't receive any objections on this, and that's why I have included point number 2, just to also streamline our process. I did bring this up at our last meeting in terms of streamlining some of these decisions, that if there is no objections or if there's no concerns raised with the community, then we can just skip the process of this coming back. So point number 2, in effect, just skips this coming back to us in February or March next year, or whenever it would have been. So again, sort of that point 2 hopefully streamlines our process ourselves as council. So I do believe that there will be hopefully no objections. It should be a welcome change to the community, and I take full credit to the officers for bringing this forward. When you see a report like this, your first natural instinct is to sort of actually look back at the rationale of why it was introduced and think why this change wasn't brought about many years ago. But yeah, let's go out there and see if there's no objections, or if there's something there that I'm not seeing. But thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sharkey. Councillor Whitfield, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just looking at the alternative recommendation or motion that Councillor Sharkey's put, it covers off if no objections are received, and what the process will be. But I think it's worth highlighting that in the report it does have the process if objections are received, and that would be to if they can't be resolved, go to a panel hearing, and onwards from there. So yeah, I just wanted to clear up that this motion tells us what happens if there are no objections, but the report also contains what happens if there are. There are some benefits in the recommendation. Removing the 120 square metre trigger will have a beneficial reduction on time to deliver permits, and reduce the officer time devoted towards them, because they were pretty much foregone conclusions for most of them. And I believe, as Councillor Sharkey said, there is a financial savings for residents in not having to pay the permit costs. And it's also worth noting that other triggers are still in place, such as setback distances and things like that. So it's not just a complete free-for-all with sheds. Yep, that's all. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks for those clarifications. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on the motion? Okay, thank you. Well, Councillor Sharkey, would you like to close the debate for your alternative recommendation?
Happy to put that straight to a vote, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 7.5. Planning Scheme Amendments, C91 Gpla General Amendment. I once again ask Director Josipovic to briefly introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This amendment is primarily based on the correction of anomalies in the planning scheme, as well as the removal of redundant controls. It includes correction of zoning and overlay anomalies, removal of redundant overlays. There are a few dozen changes in total, and they've all been included in the attachment to the explanatory report. The amendment includes a cutting red tape element, because it will reduce the resources and administrative costs of council in terms of not needing to assess as many development plan and planning permit applications, as some of the triggers for those sorts of applications are proposed to be removed. The biggest change within the amendment in terms of numbers of residents affected is the removal of the development plan overlays, or DPOs, over large parts of Bannockburn and Inverleigh. The DPOs were initially applied many years ago when the land was vacant or not substantively developed, and they were intended to guide the conversion of vacant land to large developed areas. The DPOs weren't removed after the sites were developed and continue to affect the sorts of subdivisions that are possible in established estates, generally being two-lot subdivisions. Any applicant doing this sort of subdivision has to abide by the requirements of the DPO, which was designed for a different purpose. This means they have to lodge a development plan with council before a subdivision can be considered, which is an extra layer of approvals that takes up resident and council resources. The amendment was exhibited between 7th of October and 7th of November 2021 and no objections were received. However, there were about 30 inquiries and there was one submission from the EPA with some suggestions. The suggestions relate to verifying that no land is contaminated in the amendment. Some small modifications have been made to address this submission. Having gone through a public exhibition process, council is now in a position to make a decision on the amendment. And as there were no objections, it is recommended that council adopt Amendment C91 Gpla, which corrects a number of the zoning and overlay anomalies, removes redundant overlays and schedules, rezones land for public authorities, improves the clarity, legibility of maps in the planning scheme, and extends an expiry date for certain local policies, modifying zoning and overlay schedules. 2, request the Minister for Planning to approve Amendment C91. And 3, authorise the removal of the site known as, authorise the removal of the site at Cemetery Road, Inverleigh from C91 prior to submitting the amendment for approval in accordance with recommendation 2, unless VicTrack can respond to EPA submission by the 4th of January 2022. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, so can I have a mover, please? Councillor Whitfield. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Whitfield, would you like to speak to the motion?
Very briefly, thanks, Mr Mayor. This is one that is, as said in the report, it's a periodical tidy up of anomalies that get identified over the time, generally by our planning staff. This has actually been in the works for quite a while. One of the first things that we were introduced to when we started this council term. So, yeah, a lot of work going into it and pretty procedural, really. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, nothing else. My comments were going to be similar to Councillor Whitfield, so nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any councillors who wish to speak to the motion? Okay, so Councillor Whitfield, would you like to speak further to close? I'll put the motion in to the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 7.6. Adoption of Domestic Animal Management Plan 2022 to 2025. Director Josipovic, may you briefly introduce the report, please?
Thank you again, Mr Mayor. Councils are required to develop and review a domestic animal management plan every 4 years under the Domestic Animals Act of 1994. Prior to development of our plan, a survey was posted online in August of 2021 and Council received 327 responses. The results of the survey were considered and helped inform the development of the plan. At its October 2021 meeting, Council resolved to display the draft plan, and in late October-November 2021, the plan was placed on public exhibition for comment. 67 people and all residents downloaded the draft, with 4 submissions received. The 4 submissions are summarised in the report before you. It should be noted the submissions received were considered, however no changes are proposed to the exhibited draft animal management plan for the reasons outlined in the report. In summary, the action items listed in the plan are achievable, and if approved, officers look forward to working with councillors and the community to implement the actions to improve animal welfare in the Shire. There's a 6-part recommendation in your reports for this particular item. Main one being, of course, that the draft domestic animal management plan be adopted by council. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? have a mover to accept the motion, the recommendation? Councillor Kirby. And a seconder, please. Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Kirby, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gamble. Yeah, this went out for public consultation. We were very pleased to have so many respondents come back to us with within the survey. Quite a few things that we heard from the ratepayers was that the majority of respondents wanted a cat curfew. 59% of respondents did not know that they could loan a humane cat trap from council. 16% of respondents witnessed or were involved in a dog attack, and over 60% of respondents would use a fenced-off dog park. Some of these are the things that this is what the community has told us, and I'm very pleased to say that a lot of these things will be actioned in going forward within council. So look forward to moving this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham, would you like to speak on the motion?
Mayor Gamble, no, just to follow on, I also acknowledge the significant community participation in regards to the survey that was available and posted online. Yeah, and happy to support council officers' recommendation to adopt the Domestic Animal Management Plan 2022 to 25 and submit to the applicable government department. Thank you.
Are there any other councillors who'd like to speak on the item? Councillor Kirby, would you like to close?
I think I've said enough. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. In which case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 7.7, Golden Plains Shire Rabbit Management Strategy 2021 to 2031 and Rabbit Management Plan 2021 to 2031. I'll ask Director Josipovic to briefly introduce the report.
Mr. Mayor, the Rabbit Management Strategy and Rabbit Management Plan have been developed by Council's Environment and Sustainability team to provide direction for Council's rabbit management program over the next 10 years. The strategy is a strategic plan that sets out Council's vision and goals regarding the management of rabbits on Council land and across the broader community. Developed in line with industry best practice and research, the strategy provides historical and legislative context and background information regarding rabbit biology and ecology. The Rabbit Management Plan details the actions Council will take over the next 10 years to deliver on the vision and goals of the strategy. The plan provides background on best practice rabbit management methodologies and illustrates Council's current rabbit management program. Following a period of public exhibition during October of 2021, 3 public submissions were received. Council also received feedback from neighbouring councils and the Victorian Rabbit Action Network. The submissions have been considered and minor changes made where required. The Golden Plains Management Strategy, Rabbit Management Strategy, and Rabbit Management Plan provide a clear direction for Council's ongoing rabbit management program into the future. It is recommended that Council notes the draft Golden Plains Shire Management Strategy and Rabbit Management Plan have been publicly exhibited with 3 submissions received, and 2, adopts the Golden Plains Shire Rabbit Management Strategy and the Golden Plains Shire Rabbit Management Plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Josipovic. This is our first rabbit management strategy, isn't it? I haven't seen one before in council.
It's my understanding
Yes.
as well, but this has been developed in-house, which is, I think, a great initiative by our Sustainability and Environment team to have a strategy and plan in place to guide work over the next 10 years rather than be totally reactive. But it also leaves, in case of people move, changeover, we have a plan to work to. But my understanding is it's the first one, yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Do I have a mover for the supporting this recommendation? Councillor Rowe. And a seconder? So, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Rowe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. As been mentioned, following a period of public exhibition during October 2021, we had 3 public submissions received, and we had some feedback from neighbouring council as well. I'd just like to say it's good that council acknowledges the commitment to pest management over many years and the importance of having a vision and a goal to push this work into future years. The Golden Plains Shire Rabbit Management Strategy 2021-2031 and the Rabbit Management Plan 2021 to 2031 provides a clear direction for Council's rabbit management program on council land and across the broader community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, nothing. I think Councillor Rowe spoke very well about that and covered it well enough. Thank you.
Are there any councillors who wish to speak on the motion? Okay. Well, Councillor Rowe, would you like to speak further?
Mr. Mayor, I don't think so. I think I've said enough and it's pretty straightforward. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. I'd just say also thank you to the Environment and Sustainability team and all the public submitters on it too. Item 7.8. Councillor Engagement 2022. I'll ask Mr. Brazlis to briefly introduce the report.
Councillors, following on from last year's very successful councillor engagement program, an initiative entered into by this new council and clearly stated as part of our new council plan as an initiative that the council wishes to continue and strengthen. We've prepared what is a program proposed for 2022, following on the success of last year's Coffee with the Councillors and a number of other initiatives and opportunities across the Shire for the councillors to have conversations with community on a number of matters. Primarily, you'll see as part of the program, we have prepared a number of opportunities for councillors to meet with community in advance of us preparing the draft budget. This is an item that was raised last year at the adoption of the budget, wherein councillors asked that rather than just consulting and engaging with the community once a draft budget had been prepared, you had asked that we look at opportunities to have that same conversation with community in advance of preparing the draft. We will still continue to go out to community once a draft is prepared, but we've proposed a number of opportunities for you to consult with community a little bit earlier. We put this proposed program to you for your consideration.
Are there any questions of Mr. Brazlis? In which case, I'd like a mover for the motion, please. Councillor Sharkey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put forward an alternative recommendation on this one, just to again further strengthen our commitment to community consultation. So I appreciating points 1 and 2 are part of the officer recommendation, and point 3 and 4 I've added in there. I have, and I don't personally like doing it, singled out a community there. I'm just extremely mindful of our commitment at the last meeting. Bateswood were overlooked through the rating strategy. They did request a meeting with us, and we have removed Batesford from the Coffee with Your Councillors session. We had very poor numbers last year, and that's not to suggest there wouldn't be strong numbers next year, but this just adds in a little bit of protection for us as a council group that we write to the community rate-paying group and the community group there, and just put it on them to come back to us. And I think collectively, if not 2, 3, or all 7 of us, would be more than happy to attend something. So I do put that there as a level of protection. I did receive a fair bit of criticism from the community there after the last meeting. Point number 4 adds there that, and this is an extension from the EOI period that we went through last year. I was a firm favourite of that last year. I think COVID probably had an effect on it, and I think we should rehash that again into the future. But I'd like us to put out to the community groups across the Shire that we as a collective group are more than happy to attend meetings throughout the year. You won't see all 7 of us there, but any one of us or 2 of us will attend meetings across the Shire. So I just have added those couple of points there to further strengthen the recommendation.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Sharkey's alternative recommendation? Councillor Rowe, would you like to speak on the recommendation?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I can see the benefit in item 3 and item 4 in the recommendation, and I'd just like to say, you know, as a council, we dedicated to genuine open engagement with residents and ratepayers on you know, decisions that impact their lives, and their community. So yeah, so I'm all for it, to be honest with you. So thank you.
Is there anybody who'd like to speak against the motion? Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm just concerned about us writing to the Batesford group, to their committee, and telling them that we'd like to come. I don't think we've ever written to a group in the past to inform them. I just think that's a bit much.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on the motion or the alternative recommendation? Councillor Whitfield.
Mr. Mayor, yes, all for as much consultation and communication with residents as possible. As Councillor Sharkey mentioned in his opening remarks, he didn't like to single out areas, and I'm not quite seeing the difference between point 3 and point 4, but happy to go along with it because consultation is important. Yeah, not too sure why we're writing to one group when we're in point 4. We're also inviting all groups to request a meeting with us. I believe it's kind of the same thing, but still happy to go ahead with it. Thanks.
Other councillors who wish to speak on the motion? Alternative recommendation? Councillor Getson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm like the other councillors. I do agree that this has got to happen, but I think I went to the community one there previously and we didn't get anybody turn up. So it's just, that's why we altered some of these other ones on our agenda where we went to, because we're spreading it about. And I do support, as Councillor Sharkey have said, that we need to talk to them, but I'm not too sure we should have to write to them either, because there's other groups in the north that maybe we should write to as well.
Any other speakers to the alternative recommendation? Councillor Sharkey, would you like to close the debate?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Gemma. I do take on the points there and did give it strong consideration there. I think we you know, when we talk councillor engagement, we do have to appreciate that over our 4-year journey, we will go through periods of time where communities are fully on side with us, and when we will upset some communities with some of the decisions and some of the thought processes we go through. Item number 3 there does single out a community, but I think that is fair and warranted given the absolute angst from the community. That protects us as a councillor group. That if we had have gone with the officer recommendation, the community of Bateswood would be up in arms again after and genuinely being taken out of the consultation. There. So it does offer, I firmly believe, a level of protection for us. Item 4 does just further extend to all community groups and sort of just, I suppose, says that whilst we know and appreciate, and that wording, Batesford, it may be another community next year that's upset over a decision process that we're going through, then we as a council group are more than happy to have conversations with groups. The Batesford Community Group did put a formal request in to have a formal rate-paying consultation at the group down there, so that wasn't being able to be facilitated due to the time of the year and a decision made, but that just offers a little bit of protection for us. Councillor Getsham's comments with regards to where there was no one there last year. I would say I was probably a little bit disappointed not to see Linton on this Coffee with Your Councillors Day. It was probably the best community consultation day that I've seen over the past couple of years. I think we as a councillor group really need to overcommit on community engagement. We all received an email yesterday from a resident there that genuinely doesn't believe that we're doing enough community consultation, and that forever and a day, councillors, will be the complaint by residents, because most people only want to engage with us when it's something negative or something that's going to affect their day-to-day life. I note here that we've only committed to the farmers market next year. I don't want to change the report there, but I think as a collective group of councillors, we can commit ourselves to several farmers markets during the year. It is a very good session there to get to see a lot of people. Next year we'll offer a state and federal election, and there will be lots of pollies that will be attending that as well.
Point of order.
So
that was not brought up in the original statement about the farmers markets, and I think that
yeah, sustained.
Thank you.
It's off topic.
I strongly dispute that it's off topic when it's all I'm saying is that is the
point of order, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sharkey had the opportunity to turn up to our councillor briefing day, and he didn't, and he could have turned around and spoke about it.
Point of order,
Councillor Sharkey.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's getting quite personal.
No, it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's not.
Point of order. We'd better leave that there. So, Councillor Sharkey, can you finish your...
Yeah, just finishing up. I think that's good. I'm not suggesting to change the report, but as a collective group, I'm saying that we should be attending more of those events during the year. Not as a collective sum of 7, but work together as a team, and it might be two councillors 1 month and a couple months afterwards another one. It is an opportunity to give us a lot of exposure at those farmers markets. As the Mayor mentioned earlier, there's a lot of numbers there. But thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll now put the alternative recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? Carried.
Get a division, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, division. Raise your hands for the vote, for the alternative recommendation. Councillor Getsom, Councillor Sharkey, Councillor Whitfield, Councillor Rowe, Councillor Cunningham. I'm for. And those against? Councillor Kirby. And hopefully we won't be just meeting with the community groups when their level of angst is elevated, sometimes unreasonably. We'll now skip on to item 7.10 with the council meeting date update for June 2022. I'll ask Director O'Sullivan to briefly introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just request that the council approve changing the June 2022 council meeting date from Tuesday the 21st of June to Tuesday the 28th of June, being to remain on the fourth Tuesday of the month to enable the Mayor to attend the National General Assembly of Local Government in Canberra. Thank you.
Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Kirby. And a seconder, please. Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Kirby, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's very important that we change the date. The Mayor needs to be up in Canberra meeting with their other delegates. There's a lot of important meetings that could take place on that those couple of days. So very, very pleased to move this recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham, do you wish to speak?
Mr. Mayor, no, happy to support that recommendation.
Are there any councillors who wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I don't know why we need to change anything, to be honest with you. We've got a deputy mayor, and that's what a deputy's for, to fill the position of the mayor when they're vacant. So thank you.
Any other councillors like to speak on it? Councillor Kirby, would you like to close the debate?
Just as I said, I'm very happy to move that we move the date to allow you, the Mayor, to attend Canberra. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Okay, now we move on to item number 8, notices of motion. First one, 8.1, notice of motion to...
Could we just adjourn for 5 minutes? We've just been here for 2.25 hours, and I wonder if we could just have a 5-minute break and then resume back.
Okay, do I have a seconder for the proposal? Councillor Rowe. It's 8:21 return.
To stretch.
Item 8, notices of motion. 8.1, notice of motion to provide a briefing day report on the requirements of an amalgamation of councils. Councillor Sharkey, you've brought this motion. You have 3 minutes to introduce the motion, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gamble. This notice of motion is very simple and very straightforward, councillors. It is a question that I'm often asked by people in the community. I am unable to answer that question. I have dived into the issue myself to try and find examples across the state or any legislative requirements, and I've never really got a firm discussion paper on it, or it's an issue that's never come to council on my time. So all this is asking, councillors, is that a briefing day in the first quarter of next year that officers provide us just with some background information on what it is, what would be entailed, and whether it's even legislatively able to be done. I don't know the answer to that. So hopefully that would be inside the report, and I will be able to better service ratepayers and residents across the Shire with this information, and be able to answer residents' questions on this topical issue that does come up. It does come up, raise its head during our rating review processes, but I would firmly like to be able to answer residents, and I think that a report brought to councillors would do exactly that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sharkey. So we have a motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Rowe. Councillor Sharkey, do you wish to speak to the motion further?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think it is fair.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarity. As Councillor Sharkey's the author of this, do we get to ask questions of him prior to speaking on it?
Okay, that's a fair question. Are there any questions for Councillor Sharkey? Councillor Whitfield.
Councillor Sharkey, when speaking to these residents that have come to you about this issue, what reasons have they given to you for requesting investigations into amalgamation?
Yeah, there's been a lot of different levels of that. There's been from a purely selfish point of view from certain residents that just want their house blocked off and cut off and put into another shire to receive cheaper rates. There is other people in the Shire that have asked that question and feel that it would be a good thing to be split up with four of the neighbouring councils and be offered better services that they may feel. And a range of people, I'd say, Councillor Whitfield, I wouldn't think that it's one particular group in person. And I think that a report would give us an understanding of what's actually entailed, because as I've answered to a lot of people, I firmly believe it's something that may not happen whilst we're here or into the future, but I feel that a report would give us a better understanding.
Any other further questions? Councillor Kirby.
Councillor Sharkey, I'm just wondering where your data is coming from for when you mention the whole Shire. We have not seen a survey, we have not seen numbers. Do you have numbers off the top of your head? Could you please tell us what areas of the Shire are asking for this? Because I haven't heard from any ratepayer besides Batesford who has asked for this report.
Yeah, and maybe that's due to your locale. I know in the township of Batesford and south of that, both in Lethbridge, Teesdale and the like. Many residents have asked me that. Since this has become a topical issue, I've been asked and received several phone calls, emails on the issue. As I said, I'm unable to answer the questions put to me as a councillor, and I don't feel that I'm have enough information on it.
Yeah, so you don't have the data, the amount of people who have asked for this report, because you did say that from all over the Shire, so we must not forget there is a north of the Shire as well as the south. Correct. So there's the question has come from people in the north that feel that they would be better serviced by Ballarat, but again, that's it's not to the motion.
No further questions? Okay, so we have a seconder with Councillor Rowe. So would you like to speak further on the motion, Councillor Sharkey?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think we've covered enough points there.
Councillor Rowe, would you like to speak on the motion?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, I can understand the merits in getting a briefing day in the first portion of next year. Probably gives councillors a better hand in explaining this to a ratepayer or ratepayers if they ask a question or what. And I noticed too I've just noticed too in the local media there is I know in the Surf Coast Council there was some noise about Winchelsea. They wanted to some of the ward councillors in there, or the riding councillors in the Winchelsea municipality, you call it, they were considering breaking away and then going to Colac Otway, I think, recently, so and get away from Torquay. So I think there's a little bit of a merit in it to give us the thumbs up of how it can be better explained to our ratepayers and etc. To be honest with you, and also too whether the other adjoining councils near us, whether they'd be accepting perhaps of it as well. I don't know. That's the reason for this briefing day. Thank you.
Are there any councillors who wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Whitfield.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, as Councillor Sharkey said, it's not the first time that amalgamation has been suggested during a rating review. The motivation on this motion seems to be to investigate if particular areas of the Shire would be better under the wings of our larger neighbouring councils. Calling for amalgamation investigations, I believe, is jumping the gun. The rating review is still underway.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, we're getting away from the motion. The motion isn't to formally investigate to go through the process. It's merely a briefing on the process.
Mayor, I believe the request is a report on the process and legislative requirements, which I would consider amalgamation investigations.
Point of order overturned.
Yes, so as the rating review is still underway and we have a workshop scheduled to see if we can incorporate submissions that we heard tonight, I believe the timing of this request is a little out of sync. I can see that some financial benefits for some localities to be absorbed into our neighbouring shires.
Point of order, Mr Mayor, we're swaying away from the motion if we're talking about areas being financially benefited. It's nothing to do with the motion. The motion is just to get a briefing on the process, not the outcome.
Mayor, I'm using the rationale for why we would head down this process, investigating the amalgamation process at all, and versus the rationale for it. I believe the supporting rationale is not there, and I'm about to go through those
Point of order overturned. I believe it's pertinent to the issue.
Yes, so there are possible benefits for localities to be absorbed into our neighbouring shires, but amalgamation means taking not only the premium parts of Golden Plains, but the areas that need a lot of work and infrastructure as well. Something that the larger shires are likely to shy away from. Comments made online regarding the article in the Geelong Advertiser this week suggest other municipalities have issues supporting the outlying areas of their shires, and adding responsibility might not be feasible. I believe, and as Councillor Sharkey acknowledged, the truer motion, intent of this motion, is to research realignment of boundaries. I think realigning of boundaries would only serve to make a particular area the outlier of their new shire, quite possibly receiving less attention than they do now. I believe the reason some have conveyed that they're interested in amalgamation or to be absorbed by other shires is the rate spike that they experienced this last year. The simple reason for that rate spike was property values jumped dramatically.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. We're going away from we're swaying away from the actual motion itself. The motion is just seeking a report and has nothing to do with the rating review that we've just gone through.
Could you summarise that point, Councillor Whitfield, and move on?
Sure. The point being that the rationale to investigate amalgamation, given current trends in the market, if they continued for 2 or 3 years, the rationale now becomes moot at that point. I'd just like to comment on Golden Plains identity, living in Golden Plains, fresh air, open spaces, low crime rates. There's a sense of identity in Golden Plains, and moving towards amalgamation, that could be lost. And just personally, I believe it's extremely unlikely, as Councillor Sharkey acknowledged in his opening remarks, or during questioning, amalgamation or boundary realignment is very unlikely to go ahead. It's doubtful that there would be any beneficial outcome for Golden Plains. It's questionable if the request for this report is in the best interests of the Shire as a whole, and I'm left wondering whether the request for this report on the amalgamation process has any value. Surely the place to start would be engaging the interest levels of our neighbouring shires. Do they want to inherit our debt? And I also believe this is something that a councillor could research on their own rather than utilising approximately 1 to 2 weeks of officer time for something that is extremely unlikely to gain traction. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on the issue? Councillor Kirby.
Going by what was said and why this report's been brought up, I really feel that it is, we're a lot better off if we put our money towards better services. As we heard from tonight from the farmers, from the residents, they want better services, they want better rural roads, they want better drainage, they want these things in the area. Why waste money on something that it really might not, that won't have any traction? You know, it's having a small amount of traction in one area, but let's face it, this is big dollars we're talking about. What is the agenda of not having a rural shire and becoming part of a city? By becoming a city, would our house prices escalate more than they already have?
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
If amalgamation was to happen.
Point of order. So just...
We're swaying away from the motion at hand. The motion is a report, we're not making a decision on amalgamation here tonight.
A clarification though, isn't this discussion about why we would support it? we've heard from Councillor Sharkey why he wants to do it. What I'm hearing from other councillors why they think we shouldn't be supporting it. So we need to hear that side of the story as well.
Yeah, the issue is on the amalgamation of councils as an overarching issue. So,
Mr. Mayor. So by becoming a city, would our house prices escalate more than they already have if amalgamation was to happen? Councillor Sharkey, you talk about 2 cities. Has any thought been given into the other 7 shires that abut Golden Plains Council? We have 7 direct different municipalities around us. So we have Geelong City Council, we have Moorabool City Council, we have Ballarat, we have Pyrenees, we have Corangamite, we have Corangamite, Colac Otway, Surf Coast Shire and Geelong City Council. We have 7 on our doorsteps. During the 12 months of community consultation, did you take on board any of the comments and feedback that the residents spoke about during the community vision? They love living in our rural shire. The residents felt safe, connected and enjoyed the lifestyle of living in Golden Plains. It might be okay from your perspective to bring a report back, but how many hundreds of thousands of dollars do you think it would cost to do a report to this degree? We're talking about going to solicitors, we're talking about, you know, there's a lot deeper things when you start delving into the state government than what you realise. This is and should be a state government initiative and not an initiative of Golden Plains Shire, because this is not what our residents are telling us. Once again, where's your data to support this from the whole Shire, not just one group of residents? I think that this is too much money. We really do need to concentrate on our roads, our infrastructure, our drainage within the Shire. This is what our residents are telling us. Let's keep on the ball, and this is what we promised when we got back into council this time round, that we were going to help service these things and get things up to speed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on the motion? Yes, we do. In which case, Councillor Sharkey, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Interesting comments around. I think councillors, in my opinion, are getting a little bit off track in terms of speaking about an amalgamation. In no way, shape or form does this motion suggest that we go through the process. It doesn't suggest favouritism, or it doesn't suggest in any way that I am for or against it. But there is a lot of residents out there that have posed the question, as I said, since this motion has gained a little bit of traction in the community. There is a lot of residents that have asked me the question. So this report, which let's be brutally honest, is not going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a process that would be put together by an officer, no different to many of the reports that we do get. I'd be flabbergasted if it took an officer 2 weeks full time to put this report together. The report, or the intent of the report, is something that is low key. As I did outline, Councillor Whitfield, I personally have tried to look at it, and I've struggled to get any information there, so that I have covered that. I know that there is councils that have gone through that process. I don't know what councils they are. I don't know even if it is feasible. Not feasible. I don't even know if it's allowed. And if I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of people in the township of Batesford that just want Batesford cut off and put into Geelong. I've been pretty upfront and honest with the community down there that would probably never ever happen. If there was something that was going to happen, it would be something strategic and done over a number of years, and that comes with both positives and negatives. But I don't want to veer down that track, because that's not what it's about. It's about just receiving a report from officers outlining some examples around the state where it has happened, and just a brief brief report on it. If we want to venture from that down the track somewhere else, well, that would then probably be what Councillor Kirby's talking about, of significant investment or something like that. But this is one step down a step of 100 steps, which I'd just like to be able to better inform the residents of this shire on this issue, which I have tried to research and know very little about. So I would question anyone voting against informing councillors on an issue with no position. No councillor voting for or against this is giving a position. It's just going, okay, well, I want to receive a little bit more information. I'll see what it's like and have your opinion then afterwards. Thank you very much. Mayor Gamble.
Thank you. I'll put this stage I'll put the motion to the vote. So all those in favour of Councillor Sharkey's notice of motion? All those against? Motion is lost.
Vision, please, Mr. Mayor.
Those in favour, raise your hands. Councillor Sharkey, Councillor Rowe. Those against, keep your hand raised. Councillor Kirby, Councillor Getsom, Councillor Whitfield, Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Gamble. Now we move to item 8.2. At this stage I'll vacate the chair as I'm the mover of this motion. Councillor Kirby, Deputy Mayor, will take over the seat.
Item 8.2, we have a notice of motion. Council to conduct a survey in February-March to assess community views on Australia Day. This was written by Gavin Gamble, Councillor. The motion is that Council conduct a survey in February-March to assess community views on Australia Day, the 26th of January, and the role Golden Plains Shire should have in supporting Australia Day, if at all. Recognising the Australia Day citizenship ceremony is a federal government requirement. Questions asked to include, but not limited to, should Australia Day remain on the 26th of January or be moved to an alternative date? Should Council Community Awards be awarded on the 26th of January? Should Council fund and or support community events on this day? A report on the survey results is to be presented to Council for the 26th of April 2022 at the Council meeting. Mayor, Councillor Gamble, you have 3 minutes to introduce the motion by indicating its intent and or the desired outcome if passed. Thank you.
Councillors, I've decided to withdraw my notice of motion to have a report presented back to Council on community attitudes about Australia Day. The intent was to get a snapshot of community attitudes which could down the track help shape Council responses and expenditure of how we as a community celebrate Australia Day in future years. However, upon reflection, I'm withdrawing because I recognise the need to act impartially and to be seen to be impartial. Whilst I might have pursued this as a councillor, I concede my motion could be perceived as being partisan. And as Mayor, I want to give reassurance I'm committed to representing the interests of all Golden Plains residents first and foremost. So I apologise for this divergence, but I've decided to withdraw the notice of motion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Kirby. Okay, petitions, nil. There's no urgent business listed. Confidential reports for decision, item 10. There are confidential items for consideration tonight. I now ask members of the gallery to leave the meeting so the meeting can move into closed